Hello viewers, my name is VIDELIZ, NJOKI, and that's my sign name. Welcome back to the Science TV voice show where we share different stories. Today we have a very beautiful guest. But before we continue, please remember to watch my show, the voice show on Science TV on Fridays, and we have a repeat on Sunday at 8 p.m. at night. Welcome. Feel very welcome. Hello. Is it possible that you introduce yourself and the job that you do?
Thank you so much. My name is Ruth. And this is my sign name. I am from Mombasa County.
You've heard that she's from Mombasa. I hope Mombasa people are there. So what do you do in Mombasa? Tell us about your daily life in Mombasa.
Okay, from the time I finished primary school, where was this? This was in Mumia's School for the Deaf. I think 1995, around that time. And then I moved to Vihiga School. It's still in Mumia's.
Mumia's primary, and then you moved to Mumia's. Wow, that's nice.
So after I finished, I had to move to Nairobi to stay with my family. This is where I had grown up. But at this time, I really wanted to look for a job to help my parents out. But my parents had passed away when I was in Form 2. And my uncle had felt that it was necessary for him to take me in and stay with the family. And that was okay with me. So I had stayed with them for a long time, but I kind of felt quite alone at home. So I decided...
Are you the only deaf in your family?
Yes, I'm actually the only deaf in the family. I was not actually born deaf. I was born hearing. And as I grew up, I became sick for a very long time that led me to become deaf. But I don't feel anything bad about it. So at this time, I decided to go and look for a job, but my uncle was so against this decision and wanted me to stay home.
You had finished school?
Yes, my uncle had really insisted that I stay home, and he was even willing to take me to another school. So he brought me 2 letters, one for Vihiga School in Mumias, where he wanted me to go and learn, and another letter was from Karen School. But I refused the both of them.
So the curriculum was the same?
Yes, everything was just the same. I'd already learned everything at this time. I didn't really want to go to school again. So my uncle was very upset to the point. He told me if I didn't want to go to school, then I can go back to the village and do farming. But this is the place I knew. This is the place I'd grown up in. So I just decided to stay silent and life went on. So one day as I was in church, I was interacting with a friend of mine who informed me that there's a job opportunity. And if I'm really interested, then I can really go.
That was mind-blowing.
Yes, I was very happy. So at this time, I knew the next day morning, I'll be going to meet them. So early in the morning, I went to the place we had agreed. And I got the job, I worked from morning to evening. But as I was going back home, my uncle was so upset. He was actually standing outside waiting for me to come back. I was really questioned, like, where are you coming from? I just told him that I wanted to go to work, but he had really insisted that I stay home. So I just, after that altercation, I just decided to stay home. And the next day, morning, or I decided to have some patience.
He was guarding you? Did you drop the job?
Yes. So at the end of the day, the next day when I wanted to go to work, my uncle had actually woken up early, but he was really like guarding me a lot. So I decided to prepare, but I was stuck. I couldn't leave. I had already taken my bath and prepared, and this time I'm silent. But I'm really looking at my uncle who's around, meaning I can't leave. So I had patience, but this time, the time is really going. So at 10 a.m., that's the time when my uncle actually decided to leave.
You had already wasted time enough.
Yes, I'd already wasted a lot of work, meaning I couldn't leave home at 10 going to work. So we had even agreed to, he even told me that he was going to pay for everything that I'll need, but I'm not really allowed to go to work.
He thought that when you go to job, maybe you are going to miss many things.
I really wanted to go because I knew I'll be meeting some other deaf people, but in my family, everybody is sick. So it was actually a challenge. That was actually a really big challenge for me. So my deaf friends would come at home to visit me for us to have the conversation, and my uncle was really getting upset with the fact that I had deaf friends who would come and talk to me. And my uncle really insisted that I should be speaking rather than signing, because my deaf friends, we were able to sign together. So I couldn't go out. I just was staying home. And every time I tried to go anywhere, my uncle will really block me. I wouldn't just have the freedom to go anywhere. So I remember at some time I actually even escaped home to go and stay in Jericho. And I knew at this time anything I will get a letter for work, I'll just try and escape from home, go and check the job out. So each time my uncle had that I'm really getting a job or anything, he'll really get upset with me. At this time, I'd really felt tired of always running from home just to get a job. So I just felt I really needed to move to Jericho. Later, I decided to leave and go live. I decided to go and live with another relative. But at this time, I knew my uncle would be really looking. I would really have the freedom to go interact with people. So I remember when I went to this other relative of mine, he actually called the daughter and sat us down. And I was really being questioned. At this time, I wasn't even allowed to go outside and work. So I had to be sorry for a lot of things. I will always say I'll be back in the house early. But the next day I will actually leave and go. So sometime I will go to work and come back. But after some time, I started hearing some problems. And on Sundays, they didn't want me to go to church, because they also hated when I interacted with other deaf friends of mine.
They didn't want you to interact with your deaf friends?
No. They didn't want me to interact with the deaf community.
So if you interact with the hearing, that was okay?
Yes, the problem they had was seeing me use sign language, because they felt like I am supposed to be hearing.
So they felt that using sign language is like not good?
Yes, actually mouthing was they would rely on me to use. And even dressing was a problem. And I was really struggling with them, and I was really having a challenge. When I went out, they would say, maybe I'm going to meet men or something. It wasn't really easy. They also kept on telling me to change my outfits because they felt it wasn't good enough. I was really struggling so much. So I finally decided to escape, and that's how I ran and went to Mombasa. I actually escaped to Mombasa, and later my uncle came to look for me. But at this point, I had already moved to Kisauni to stay there. And I was really trying to network and get my life going. I didn't know people, but I kept on asking. And at this time, I knew my uncle was really looking for me for around 3 months. And he was ready to take the cross to carry msalaba yangu at this time until everything will change. So I stayed there for 3 years, and then I came back to Nairobi. I used to wash people's clothes and do different jobs in Mombasa. That was what I did for a living. So when I came back to Nairobi, I remember some of the relatives were so shocked. They didn't really know what was really happening. Then they were really asking questions, asking if I had challenges when I escaped to Mombasa, and some of them even respected my decision. I would go and come back, and I stayed there for around 5 years.
Oh. Parents' interaction.
Yes. So at this time, I knew my relationship with, and my relatives had actually decided to respect my decision. And at this time, it was staying good because I used to go and come back for 5 years. I actually met a deaf boyfriend, and my boyfriend was actually deaf. And there's a time I went to take them. I took him to the parents to meet the parents and the family. So when I went there, my uncle got upset because I was actually coming to marry a deaf man.
They didn't want you to marry a deaf person?
Yes, they hated my boyfriend at this time. And I really tried to explain. And maybe when I came to the family, we were trying to discuss about a future life with this man. And they kicked him out. And they were so serious when they kicked him out. And they didn't want me to go with him. They actually asked me to stay. And they were really complaining that I'm actually deciding to marry a deaf man.
That was really challenging.
Yes, it was actually challenging. I was suffering. And what was I even suffering from? At this time, when the family are meeting in anything, I wasn't really involved.
Same your boyfriend?
And my uncle at this time and you see, in my family level, they were really interacting in groups, which did not involve me. And each and every time I was facing a challenge and a problem. So at this time, my uncle actually decided and refused to even accept this man. And it was really big challenge. So life actually continued. And I remember when I went to the village, my mother did not have a problem. She was actually very accepting and interacted with him well. My mother did not have a problem with me being deaf or me signing. But when my mom called my uncle to express her issues, that was another issue. Another issue came up, and it was a new argument. So my uncle even brought a list of things that he has actually done and brought me back to my mom, and said, we are actually signing and ending any form of relationship which we're going to be having. So my uncle actually, that's where he gave up on me and left everything for us, and he left. So life continued, and I will go to, at this time with my mom, that everything was different because I will go to church, I will sign, I will interact with different people. And I remember it was in December, we usually have a family gathering where each and every person is coming. And it was the issue of me deciding to marry a deaf man would always come up. And I was planning to have a wedding, and nobody wanted, most of my uncle.
The family did not want to join you?
Yes. Most of them who had a problem of me marrying a deaf man did not want to come to my wedding. And my uncle was really trying to block other people.
Same, your uncle would never come? He
really refused to come to my wedding.
You're very strong.
I had to have patience, and when we were making these arrangements for the church and everyone, some of the relatives were understanding and did not really, and they allowed me to actually marry the deaf guy. So after the wedding was finished, I remember I gave birth to my first child and later to my second child. And when I went to visit my uncle at home, they were actually shocked to see that I have 2 children. So at this time, they actually wanted to know, and my uncle was actually shocked to hear that when he asked of the name, my child will actually say the name. My name is Paul. He was actually shocked to hear my child could speak.
So they thought you'd get a deaf baby?
Yes, that's what he had speculated, that if you marry a deaf man, then you must have deaf children.
Oh.
And you must remember that I was not even born deaf. I became deaf later in life. I was born hearing. And he was actually shocked to hear I'm coming back home with my deaf child. And some of the relatives were really shocked. And my cousins would come And they were really expressing their concerns that they thought if I married a deaf man, then my children will be deaf. That's why they were stopping me from this marriage that was to happen. They just were trying to explain that they didn't have any bad intention, but all they wanted was not to have deaf child, and maybe they thought it would be a burden. And they saw that everything was well and my life was moving on well, and that's what made them just stop their speculations.
I'm very shocked, because how did they expect to block you and you continued on with your life? He blocked you from everything. He tried all he could so that he could block your wedding. That is really nice.
Thank you so much.
So we'll have a short break. We'll be back. We continue with the interesting story. Welcome back. We'll continue with the sweet story. So I love how you stood for yourself and your boyfriend. You're really strong. So that aside, I want you now to share. You've shared with us how you grew up to now, where you got job until you got married. So tell us more.
Okay, as I had said before, my name is Ruth. I used to work in Mombasa, and when I arrived in Mombasa, my first jobs were washing and cleaning services. So later I moved and became a teacher. In a school, I used to teach palsy or cerebral palsy. Yeah, cerebral palsy students, and we had a few deaf students there. But some of these children were from wealthy families, so it was actually a different case.
So the schools were just around?
Yes. I taught for 6 years. And later I got posted. I was actually working with different people. I would go to the side for some interviews and training and continue teaching on the side. So later I had some interviews going that were actually giving me good opportunities. And at this time, I was also continuing with the training, and the work was continuing.
So you would interchange them?
Yes, I did both of them at the same time. That continued for a while until I realized I had to inform my boss that I'm actually leaving the job, and this was actually going to happen for 3 months. It was actually a challenge for me to inform my boss. I had actually decided to contemplate on it. And when I went, my boss was an Hindu man, and he actually said that I was like willing to leave, and maybe they replaced me with another person, but he really insisted that I have to stay. So he actually knew that most of the children loved me as their teacher, and he didn't want me to leave. Some parents actually were really ready to accept. So this was 6 years down the line. They weren't ready to let go of me as a teacher. So if I left, it was going to be my own problem. So later they allowed me, and I didn't really waste much time. I also left. Yes, I left. I continued working with this football team for like 6 years. And after that, I didn't get to sit down and rest. I had to have my own life because it was my responsibility to pay for my school and my child's school and food and provide as a mother. So that's why I decided to go and teach. I've taught sign language for like 12 years. And I love my job.
So do you teach sign language?
Yes, that's what I do. That's what I do right now. It's 12 years.
So you don't have another job?
Yeah, I have another job. You remember when I ran from my uncle's place and went to Mombasa? I met this deaf women group. It was actually like it wasn't really there, but after some time, we got so many people, and that opened our minds, and we decided to stay together. And after 2 years of working together with this group, my contract ended, and I just decided to move to another job still in Mombasa. So we had already empowered people here, but now it was about time we do other things. So it continues up to now. So one, I have a deaf women group in Mombasa, a sports deaf group, and a Mombasa Association for the Deaf. And I also am
You work for the government?
Yes, I also work for the government as a representative for the deaf, and the county board representative, which also includes board of. Yes, so this is a board. It's like CDF representative in Mombasa. And also in Mombasa School for the Deaf. I have very many things which I do. I just move around doing many things.
I'm very shocked because you've just been going from rank to rank to rank. You have a board, you have education, you are a representative, CDF. You represent people with disability.
Yes, that's right.
So I want to know, what makes you strong? Because you had a good family who supported you. You moved on to your uncle who never liked you. He never had your interests at heart. What made you make sure that you must show my uncle that you can do it?
Thank you for the question. And before I thought that before I wanted to do thing and work hard because I wanted to change my parents' life, but later I came to learn that you remember my mother. My mother actually died before the wedding, so that really broke my heart, and I was the only deaf person in the family. I had really experienced some level of abuse. So it was really challenging, and I really had to learn to take care of myself. And my uncle actually was feeling like a deaf person is nothing, and he really oppressed me a lot. That was so hard for me to deal with. So through all this harshness, I had to learn to work hard. And not just sit down and allow other people to take responsibility of my life. Whenever I had a challenge, I had to go above that challenge. If my family thought I couldn't do something, I had to prove that I could. I had to toil, sweat, and work hard to make sure everything goes as it should. Not like walking around, feeling sorry, and asking things from them. I didn't allow anybody to bring me down. I worked from down to make sure my life had to go on and continue as well as it could. I really didn't even want to go and get anything, or if anyone was offering some things to me, I really refused, because I knew many people will be talking behind my back and will go complaining of how I paid for this deaf child of ours some things and she's not really appreciating, she's being a negative person. So when I moved to Mombasa, which was actually far, it wasn't impossible for them to really come there as often as they could. So that's how I actually had to learn to work hard for myself.
So, is your uncle still negative? I think you used that negativity and turned it to positivity. And that is really nice. So viewers, we've had, it's important to stand up for yourself. Whatever passion you have, choose for yourself. Choose whatever makes you feel good. So is it possible that you advise our youths whose parent maybe has decided their lives for them, and maybe they are disabled? Maybe the parents want them to follow a certain route and that's enough. But them, they have maybe a different passion or something different they want in life. So what can you tell them?
Thank you so much for that question. I know we all come from different places. So in primary school, you're in a school for the deaf and you're only having girls around. So you will interact with them. And when you're interacting with people, you get to know the parent, the mother, the father. They will explain, maybe I feel my parents don't really love me. I want to run away from home. And they'll be really sharing their stories of how maybe their mother is suffering. And maybe I didn't even have innerwear when I was coming to school. My parents are not really providing. When interacting with people, you get to learn a lot of things. So maybe you have to understand and you have to have the patience. And if you're able to support someone, you give it. Maybe this girl doesn't have Colgate or innerwears. You have to be there and you have to encourage them to focus on their education, because that is what will determine their future. Because if you have the knowledge from school, then you gain a lot. Rather than just go, maybe the mother is a farmer who's actually struggling to get the least money to make sure they can give back.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure you're keeping the interest at heart. And you get maybe other sponsors and every other person who can give very many things to the children to make sure they are encouraged and they have enough to make sure they don't only rely on their parents, but they have people who are role models. And these will keep the children's interest going. Sometime you'll hear we understand at some age they'll be having some topics of relationship, but it's better to encourage them to be serious and to work so hard to make sure they achieve everything and not hate going back home, because you can't stay in school forever. Because once you get the basic skill, then you're going to be in a good position to get everything you want in future. So there's a time I worked for 3 months, then you're moving to other things. I remember I even washed clothes. I did a lot of things. I just did basic things, but I had the patience. I would save some money, and later I had the opportunity to start a family and everything. So I didn't have everything planned and everything well, but we also have to share these concerns. And if there's any speculations anyone has for the future, we have to go to different places and encourage them to make sure they teach us and they learn from the challenges that you faced. And that's how I encourage everybody.
So viewers, you've had everything, and people with disability, the youths who are watching, please be patient. As she has said, everything has its own time. Be patient with your education and everything else. So please, you can watch us here at Science TV. See you next time. Bye bye.